Hey y'all, good evening. Thank you for joining me, Dorothea, on Through an Orthodox Christian Lens. Tell me, do you remember this? American Orthodox under attack, a Ukrainian scenario for the USA? Blogger Mark Trikovich, creator of the Tribulation Saints channel, emphasizes that the harassment of participants at the congressional meeting is quote-unquote the first move in a narrative campaign that could lead directly to persecution of the church in this country. This is how it always starts. Not with chains, not with courts, but with stories, with headlines, with subtle accusations that train the public not to trust believers, he says. He emphasizes. In fact, he describes the Overton window technique that was implemented in Ukraine and is now being attempted in the U.S. Quote, Step 1, label a religious group as foreign. Step 2, frame them as a political threat. Step 3, use vague terms like concerns, potential, and possible influence to create fear without evidence. Step 4, let the public's imagination do the rest. Label the group as foreign. I have to remember that. Okay, so Trikovich emphasizes that the puppet masters cast a shadow of suspicion over the entire Orthodox Church and then hand this loaded weapon to the crowd, quote unquote. Quote, because as soon as society sees you as a threat, it stops seeing you as a neighbor, and that's when persecution begins, he says. Moreover, the hatred is stirred not only against the enemy, quote unquote, Rokor. As another popular blogger, Jay Dyer, points out, it also includes Serbian, Antiochian, and other Orthodox jurisdictions. That's really important. But why is this technique being implemented in America now? Dyer answers, it's also tied into, of course, the recent surge in Orthodox conversions that we've been seeing from Protestant and Roman Catholic and even atheist opinions out there in America. People are turning to Orthodoxy. A lot of churches are tripling in size. Yeah. Okay. Trikovich says the same. According to him, quote unquote, Orthodoxy is becoming the fastest growing Christian tradition in America, especially among young Americans. And this is happening not only in the US, but also in Europe. For example, in the Czech Republic, which until recently was considered the most atheistic country in the EU, the percentage of Orthodox believers has sharply increased today due to Ukrainian refugees. I mean, the foreign part is really important because this is exactly it. We live in a country that is anti-Russian. It's anti-China, but China does not have, China is not about the Orthodox Church at this time. They do have Orthodox Church there, but that's not the point here. The point is that it's been drummed into our heads for my whole lifetime, and I'm sure even in portion of, in my parents' lifetime, and now they continue to do this to make Russia our enemy, the boogeyman. Okay? And so what do you think? Now, I had to pull myself out of my own experience of my, being a cradle sort of Orthodox / revert coming back to the church, and seeing it from outside of mine and how I've heard people say, well, I can't go to the Orthodox church because the one down the street because it's a Greek Orthodox and I'm not Greek and I don't speak Greek, so I can't do that. Well, I can't go to that one because it's Russian and I don't speak Russian. I can't go to that because it's Serbian and I don't speak Serbian. It seems like it's for the Serbians, this is for the Greeks, and this is for the Russians. Well, they're going to use that, the way I understand this article, they're going to use that to their advantage by saying, look, see, all of these churches are really connected to the Russian church. Look, see, Serbians, they're Slavs, and we have the Russian church here. We have the Rokor, Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia Church. These are all connected, and then of course all these other churches are supporting them. Well, obviously they're just a part of this groups. They're all foreign entities that have infiltrated our America and are tricking people into becoming members of their church. They're using this they're using Jesus, or they're deceiving people. Can you not see that? I can actually see that when I really look outside of it, what this is saying. I don't know if this is going to happen, but if history has anything to do it, that's pretty normal for the Orthodox Church. What has been happening to the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church for the past few years has also been happening to the Estonian Orthodox Church and its 100-year-old monastery. It's actually a convent, but they call it monastery too, as well as the Moldovan Orthodox Church. I shared these new reports months ago. This began last month in the U.S. Before that, this issue the American Orthodox are bringing awareness to in our country were simply ignored before this, before they spoke out. Because we had the nerve to speak up for our persecuted brethren of the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church in Ukraine. It's a global attack on the Orthodox churches, especially those churches that are under the Moscow Patriarchate, as that's how the system has worked in our church for a very long time. Each one has a patriarchate for certain ones, and it's been this way for quite some time. Anyway, a few days ago, the UN addressed the issue of suppressing religious freedom to the Estonian Orthodox Church here. Okay, so they raised concerns over this. Came out on the 16th. Beautiful church. United Nations human rights experts expressed concern Sunday about legislative and administrative measures against the Estonian Orthodox Christian Church, stating these actions may amount to impermissible restrictions on freedom of religion or belief and minority rights. We are concerned that recent steps taken by the Estonian authorities, ranging from legislative amendments to administrative decisions, appear to disproportionately affect a single religious community, the expert said. Canonical identity, ecclesiastical hierarchy, and spiritual allegiance are integral components of the freedom of religion and are fully protected under international law. That's right. They should not be butting in to how a church's ecclesiastical hierarchy works. The experts pointed to amendments to the Churches and Congregations Act, a May 2025 court ruling, and public statements challenging the EOCC's canonical affiliation, which they said risk stigmatizing a major institution for both ethnic Estonians and Estonia's substantial Russian-speaking community. Yes. They expressed concern at the withdrawal of public funding, exclusion of the EOCC from consultations, restrictive residence permit decisions affecting clergy, and reliance on undisclosed security assessments. National security is not a permissible ground for restricting freedom of religion or belief. They recalled the Article 18 of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Article 9 of the European Convention on Human Rights. They emphasized that any limitations must be justified with careful attention to full respect of human rights, including proportionately necessity and non-discrimination. So, this is where I'm talking about this convent. Among the measures cited were the abrupt termination of the church's long-standing lease in Tallinn, a significant and unexplained increase in insurance premiums for the Poktista convent, and the expulsion or de facto removal of senior clergy without adequate procedural safeguards. In 2024, His Eminence Metropolitan Evgeny of Tallinn, the church's primate, was forced to leave Estonia when authorities refused to renew his residency permit. Officials provided no cause for the decision, despite having publicly stated they had found nothing suspicious in his conduct or in the church's activities. Anyway, this has been going on for quite a while, and So they called on the Estonian government to halt administrative and judicial actions directed at the EOCC and its institutions pending the outcome of a constitutional review by the Supreme Court of the amendments to the Churches and Congregations Act and launch inclusive consultations with affected communities. Okay. So now I'm going to get to the main story here. But you need the background that this is happening all over the place. And I gave you the background of my past video on this so that you're up to speed. So, came out today. Advocacy Coalition acknowledges religious freedom is Ukraine's quote-unquote Achilles heel. A leaked internal document from the American Coalition for Ukraine reveals that the organization views religious freedom advocacy as a critical vulnerability in its efforts to maintain support for Ukraine, describing it as our Achilles heel. The document obtained by the UOJ was presented during an emergency call held by the ACU on Wednesday night. The call was convened in response to a day of action organized by the Society of St. John of Shanghai and San Francisco that saw a pan-Orthodox group of nearly 200 hierarchs, clergy, and laity meet with dozens of congressmen. Unsurprisingly, the document contains propaganda meant to distract from and justify the persecution of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which was protested by American Orthodox Christians on Wednesday. Russia-aligned actors have found a politically correct way, this is a quote, Russia-aligned actors have found a politically correct way to advocate for Russia in the West, end quote, by focusing on religious freedom and the persecution of Christians, it states. The ACU identified the UOJ and Society of St. John Director of Government Affairs, Catherine Whiteford, as quote-unquote key players driving the narrative. So this is what they have on here. Why this matters now. This is the strategic frame, they said. After nearly 4 years of full-scale war, Russia-aligned actors have found a politically correct way to advocate for Russia in the West. Religious freedom, persecution of Christians. So they think that we're all doing this because we're somehow deceptive and liars, and we're doing, devious things, things that are not what we are actually doing. This is our Achilles heel. It bypasses national security skepticism. It activates U.S. culture war instincts, especially among conservatives. The goal is not theology. The goal is undermining U.S. support for Ukraine. You see how they change everything into a political thing, a political reason. The ACU presentation describes what it considers common tactics, quote unquote, including, quote, priests in cassocks on Capitol Hill, end quote, and, quote, icons, crosses, and prayer imagery, end quote. According to the document, these visuals, quote, short-circuit policy skepticism, end quote, and, quote, read as authentic faith under attack. Because the UOC is under attack and has been under attack for several years now. A slide titled, quote-unquote, Orthodoxy in America, Why the U.S. is a Battlefield, provides the coalition's analysis of various Orthodox jurisdictions. The Orthodox Church in America is described as, quote-unquote, founded by the Moscow Patriarchate and a, quote, predominantly convert church, end quote, with, quote, strong emphasis on the Russian saints and missionaries, end quote. Again, this is all political and it's also ignorance. The Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia, ROKOR, is characterized as, quote, Moscow's most ideologically conservative outpost abroad. Again, this is all political talk, which, quote, acts as a foil to other Orthodox churches, end quote. So here you see it. It says, recognized mainly by Moscow-aligned churches, the OCA. Actually, it's recognized by all churches. Greek, Antiochian, Serbian, Romanian, Bulgarian, whatever others I might have forgotten, claims exclusive canonical authority over U.S. territory. That's not how that works. Cultural, I think they have autocephaly, so I don't... You see how ignorant these people are. All they want to do is, this is all, they see everything through a political lens. cultural reality, predominantly convert church. Oh, how dare them. Of course, there's that scare. Oh my gosh, they're all going to be taken under, they're going to be bamboozled by the Russian Orthodox Church, and, they're enemies because we are enemies to the Russians. English language liturgy, yeah. Strong emphasis on Russian saints and missionaries. Okay. And then, of course, they go with the Rokor, founded after Bolshevik Revolution, fiercely anti-communist. In 2007, resubmitted to Moscow Patriarchate, participates in Moscow governance. Yeah, they reunited with the church. Today, Moscow's most ideologically conservative outpost, as we said. This is just ridiculous. By contrast, the Orthodox Archdiocese of America is identified as, quote, a key counterweight in the U.S., end quote, that recognizes the state-backed Orthodox Church of Ukraine. Again, this is all political. The ACU ignored the fact that members of the Greek Archdiocese have participated in both St. John's Society events in Washington. Another slide, tilted, quote, converts matter more than people think, end quote, states that, quote, many leading voices are converts, end quote, who are, quote, more ideologically rigid, frame orthodoxy as civilizational identity, and become effective political activists, end quote. Okay. According to the confidential source, speakers during the presentation said they had recently met with as we know, the Joe Wilson, the representative, he was terrible, who called for the persecution of Orthodox Christians in the U.S. and that the situation is, quote unquote, getting under his skin, end quote. Meeting organizers instructed attendees to thank Senator Chuck Grassley and Representative Wilson for bringing attention to what they called a serious foreign intelligence, quote unquote, risk posed by Orthodox Americans. A serious foreign intelligence risk posed by Orthodox Americans. Again, they're tying us to as if we're some kind of traitors, enemies, because we are canonical with the Russian Church. Real problems here. The Society of St. John has stated that it did not advocate for an end to U.S. support for Ukraine. No, it didn't. But rather requested accountability measures to ensure tax dollars are not funding the persecution of Christians. The organization's day of action included representatives from every Orthodox jurisdiction in the United States. But this American Coalition for Ukraine describes itself as an alliance of over 100 organizations united by the mission to ensure Ukraine receives necessary support to defend itself and restore a just peace and its territorial integrity. But just ignore the church, the persecution that's been happening to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. This is disgusting. I know I can be kind of emotional on this, but this is ridiculous and it's disgusting and it's also ignorant. When you're so blinded by just your political motives, you can't see anything but that. So we see that. And where did my thing go? I had another thing up. And now what did I do with it? I don't see it. Shoot. Well, it was here. Now it's not here. Oh, here it is. Yeah. There's Grassley. I was just not happy. Yeah. He calls rally near the Capitol in defense of UOC Russian propaganda. Where have we heard that before? Haven't we heard that for years now? With the Russiagate stuff and, we're all just agents. We're all just puppets and agents of Putin. And so he's criticizing, the meeting, of course. And he claims he says stating that the claims of persecution against the UOC do not correspond to reality. It's pretty obvious. Yeah. So he described the attendees as, quote unquote, representatives of the Russian Orthodox Church. Again, making it political, despite the fact that they were drawn from half a dozen jurisdictions, including the Greek Orthodox Diocese. Yeah. And Grassley also accused the meeting organizers. He accused the organizers of falsely claiming persecution by the Ukrainian government on behalf of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. How much more ignorant? How much more ignorant do you have to be? Speaking with no knowledge, you just get your notes from, whoever gives it to him because he has no clue. Obviously, it's all slanted and it's not true. And to me, this has just intensified since last month. That's why I'm putting out this video, because all of these things that I was saying, we're going to be looked at as a foreign entity or as, just Russian backers. Well, this is exactly what's happening. And you're getting more Congress people talking about it. So it's not really, I thought, well, it's a possible scenario, but I don't know. The way it works in this country, this isn't, we've seen things in the past where groups of people were demonized over whatever the subject matter was. It's not a first. So the fact that now they're targeting us, or they're making sure that we shut up because, oh no, we got to support Ukraine. It's not about that. It's about our brothers and sisters going through terrible things in Ukraine and in the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church. And again, this is happening globally because anybody that even has a tie to the Russian Orthodox Church is being, persecuted in a way. Okay, so like we said, the Estonian church, that's been going on for a while. They've been trying to take over the convent monastery there, trying to shut it down, telling them to drop their allegiance. They kept saying this to the abbess there. You've got to drop this allegiance to Moscow, the patriarch. You got to cut all ties. Well, she can't make that decision because it's a canonical issue, which was pointed out in that the article I read ages ago, several months ago, even last year probably, but mostly probably towards the beginning of this year, because I started about a year ago on reporting all this, sharing what I was reading of these reports and articles. So it's not new. It's the UN apparently is now involved, but what really happens when the UN gets involved? Let's be honest, okay? How much do they actually get done? How much power do they really have to do anything on this? Not much. But let's just remember, we're on the cusp. We're going down a path. We're going down a path that we're going to be considered the enemies of our government, because we're in communion with their enemy. Not all Congress people, of course, but I'm saying the majority of these people are feel this way. Because, as I said in my video that I did on this the first time that I shared with you, it's the boogeyman. You always have to have somebody to fight. And that's one of the major problems with our country. So, let's pray that hearts are softened in our government, and that God enlightens their darkness. I always ask for that myself, for me, but really wanted to share this with you because it just seems to me things are not dying down. They're going that route as what was suggested might happen. Thanks so much for watching, for subscribing to my channel. Until next time.